Well, good evening to one of all. This is another episode of Yada Yahowah Radio. I'm here with Kirk and Dee. It has been an eventful week in Israel. For those who are paying attention to the goings-on in God's home, where his people reside. Two young boys, I don't know if they were 5 or 6 years old, cute as they can be. We're driving through a very antagonistic, pro-terror, Pakistani town. And for doing so, they were gunned down and murdered at point-blank range by a Pakistani.
Yes.
And the settlers that, I don't even know why they're called settlers, but the Jews who live in the area responded inappropriately, but understandably. And they took the law into their own hands, and with the encouragement and blessing of the new finance minister and Netanyahu's exceedingly religious and crazed coalition, decided that they would burn the town down. That the right thing to do would be to torch cars and to torch stores and to torch homes and burn the community down. They, to their credit, weren't hunting to kill people. They just wanted to eliminate the blight of this place that had encouraged so many terrorist acts and murdered these two young boys. Mm. Well, it was grossly inappropriate. We've talked about violence on this program before, and it's something that Israel, who we care deeply about, needs to understand, which is that there's only one justification for using anything other than your words. And the words should always be used first, but you do need to know how to speak them. You need to know that there is no such thing as a place called Palestine. There is no such thing as people known as Palestinians. They have no history there. They have no rights there. They do not belong there. And they are doing everything as a community in their power to eradicate Jews. There is no two-state solution. Use your words. Tell the history of the actual Philistines and then compare them to these Arab Muslims. But instead, they rioted and killed an individual. I was going to share that the one justification is if you are witnessing an individual physically harming an individual who cannot independently defend themselves, and if you are capable of bettering that situation, or if it's your own child or spouse, you can sacrifice even your own life to preclude the individual being physically harmed, that is your family member, then you have a right to use violence. You know, if you see someone raping your child, you can grab a 2x4 and knock them dead. What you've done is a good thing. If you see someone raping an innocent woman and you can stop them and you have a gun, you have a knife, you have a club, take it after them. You see someone about to behead or to murder someone else and you have the means to stop them, do so. Right. That is the only justifiable use of violence. Someone comes into your home and you have reason to fear they're going to do bodily harm to your family, you can use physical violence to stop them. But you've got no justification doing as America is doing, going into the Ukraine with all manner of weapons so that we can use them as a proxy to fight and kill Russians. We can't go into a place like Iraq or Afghanistan and kill 1 million people. We have no right to do that. And these Jews had no right to go into a community of Pakistanians and start torching the place and burn it down. When you do that, you are no better than the perpetrators of terror. But unfortunately, this government is encouraging those kinds of acts, not Netanyahu himself, but those he has partnered with to prevail as prime minister. Here are some items in the news that are worth reading. There was they call him a pro-Palestinian activist, not knowing there is no such thing as a Palestinian. He's not an activist, he's a terrorist. He went looking to beat Jews at a New York City rally. He had been arrested and convicted for beating up Jews previously. He had conspired to bring all manner of weapons and Molotov cocktails to kill Jews this time. He is on record writing that, well, F all Jews. And he says, if you wear a mask, they can't tell who you are. No face, no case is what Massoud wrote. Violent, only violent in Palestine, which doesn't exist. They wish they could smack Jews and not get tortured. We can, though. And yet he is free. The two boys that I mentioned that had been killed, Yaakov Yisrael Pali, he was 5 years old, and his brother was 7. It's worth looking up a picture of them to see what indiscriminate Islamic terrorism does. Those two young boys were murdered at point-blank range by a Muslim simply because they were Jewish. The town, Towrah, it's north of Ramallah. Ramallah is kind of central Israel. So this is definitely above, north of Jerusalem. It became a hotbed of terror. It has claimed the lives of 14 people, and Muslims in these areas have cleared the life of 14 innocent Jews since the beginning of the year. In fact, I think it's now 16. A dual American-Israeli on vacation was murdered just outside of Jericho. But in this particular case, hundreds of Jewish, they call them extremists, and I would say their behavior was extreme. They went on a rampage, that's also a fair term, in Huwara, and they chanted revenge as they burned places down. I'm going to tell you, as someone looking at this who cares deeply about Israel, that when you do that sort of thing, you will turn the world against you. You already have enough enemies. You do not need more. And Smotrich, who is the finance minister, tweaked here on a Twitter account that he liked the idea of erasing the village of Huwara. It was before the rampage. And he called for the state of Israel to wipe it out. These are not responsible things. Someone like this does not belong in government. It's going to cause Israel to be so isolated that this two-state final solution will be forced on them. Abbas, who they like to call President Abbas, he was never elected. Even in the one vote, he didn't receive the majority of the votes, and since that time he's never held another election because he knows he would not receive enough votes even to be able to counterfeit a win. He has now called on the Pakistani defense forces, who are clothed in American garments and given American weapons, trained in America, given American bullets, that they should now resist all entry into Pakistania by the IDF. Now, the reason the IDF has been going into Pakistania is to rout out groups like Lion's Den and other Pakistani groups like Islamic Jihad, to put them in jail or kill them before they kill Jews. And it's because Abbas has no credibility. He has no control over those areas. They have completely moved out because they're too influenced by Hamas. And as a result, Israel has to go in with these preemptive strikes and to also find the terrorists who are murdering their people. But now the Palestinian Authority is telling that if they enter our lands, they don't have any lands, don't hesitate to confront them. That it would be armed insurrection against Israel. We are that close to war. One of the most disgusting human beings on the planet, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Went off and decided to do something that America has only done once before, to vote against Israel and a UN resolution. They didn't abstain. They didn't block it. Voted against Israel. And it was one of those things where even Netanyahu came out and said, what in the hell is wrong with the United States? There was no mention in this resolution of pay for slay. There was no mention in this resolution of the PA indoctrinating their kids to kill Jews. There was no mention of the innocent Jews that had been murdered this year. There's no mention of the fact that we have a history in this land and they have none. There's no mention of the fact that the IDF does a better job of minimizing civilian casualties than any other military in the world. But this idiot, he went and voted against Israel. There'll be a consequence of that for America. You can be assured. He was also sitting down next to Lavrov, his counterpart of Russia. And Lavrov, right with him sitting there, said, we knew that the United States took part in blowing up the German-Russian pipeline. We told the world they needed to do an independent investigation. This was 2 months prior to the invasion of the Ukraine. We knew it had happened. It was an act of war. So let's not play around with this pretense that the Russians started this war. It was started by the United States. And old Secretary of State Anthony Blinken just sat there with his finger up his nose. He had nothing to say. It's amazing how poorly
That's bad, he's Jewish.
Yeah, how badly what Jews in America are some of the most anti-Semitic people in the world. Yes, so the United States, voted against Israel in a condemnation against Israel. Netanyahu said the statement never should have been made, and the United States never should have joined with it. Not very often you'll find a Israeli politician willing to be that blunt against the United States. But he said in the one-sided statement, the Security Council ignored Palestinian terrorism, the incitement and financing of the terrorists and their families by the Palestinian Authority, and Europe and the United States contributions to pay for slay, which the UN continues to be biased and one-sided and indirectly gives a green light to Palestinian terrorist organizations. Now, there are a lot of stupid people in Israel. The religious are the dumbest. Rabbi Amar said this week, he is the head chief rabbi. I mean, Israel must have 5,000 chief rabbis. He's the Sephardic chief rabbi of Jerusalem. And so Shlomo Amar, who is wearing his very, very fancy clothes, he is a dapper dude in his religious outfit and his white beard and his religious little hat. He went out and said that the earthquakes in Israel, which have been really minor, are wholly to blame upon the LGBTQ plus community. Yep. They are the reason. Yeah. It's not me interpreting, he says. It's the language of the Gemara. By the way, it's not the language of the Torah. It's the language of the Gemara, he said, quoting from Talmudic passages. Quote, God said you are shocking your people for something that is not yours. That's how he interpreted that. But I'm not interpreting it. God said, now he's quoting from the Talmud, and he says, God said, which means that the rabbi who wrote it was God. And by the way, as he's saying this, the entire square beneath him is filled with moronic Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
But hey, Judaism isn't the only corrupt religion in the world. Catholic clergy in Portugal sexually abused 5,000 children since 1950. If the Catholic clergy in Portugal sexually abused 5 kids, it is a tragedy. 50, it is an unforgivable act. 500 in Portugal alone, and he would say, burn the house down. 5,000. Country after country after country after country. Story is all the same. The most disgusting organization on the planet.
No argument there.
There are, it's an article written by another Miriam Pham is her name. She probably has an IQ of 3. She was writing about how horrible it is that females are being suffering female mutilation, genital mutilation. And and she's telling the story about how at 34, they always like to tell a little story to catch your eyes, that there was a girl was 11, her legs were spread, her genitals were exposed, her fear stiffened her body, and then there was the pain. Now, whether there was such an individual, who knows? It's just a way that they have been taught to write their stories. Let me tell you what's important. That the number is 200 million. 200 million little girls and women living today had their genitals mutilated by Muslim parents. And this writer said, it is the enriched social norm and really deeply rooted in cultural beliefs and sometimes in religious beliefs. She says, it is prevalent in parts of Africa and the Middle East and Asia, and it's performed in communities of different cultures and faiths. 99% of it is one religion.
Muslim.
And the 1% that isn't that one religion is a form of Christianity that is so immersed in Islam, they wouldn't know up from down, the Copts. In Egypt, it is something in the range of 90% of women are sexually mutilated. And it is a growing problem in France because of the growing Muslim population. It is disgusting that mothers participate in mutilating their daughters. But it is what they do. There was discussions over the last week that China is going to be supplying weapons to Russia, which the United States says, oh, if you do, bad for you, going to start a new Cold War. How could you be so inhuman? As we send hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons to the Ukraine. But if somebody were to side with Russia and the defense of Russia in this argument, they're bad. The United States, good. We are such total and complete hypocrites.
Yeah.
Speaking of being hypocrites, two brothers from Pakistan were released this week from Guantanamo. They were held there for 20 years. No charge was ever brought against them. For 20 years, they were held in prison and not a single charge against them. One of these men has a 20-year-old son that he's never seen. That is reprehensible. There's no excuse for it. We only have Guantanamo and other CIA-run prisons and military-run prisons because we can't torture and abuse people under the U.S. Constitution in the United States. Sickening what we have done. Speaking of sickening, now here's just an individual story. There was a woman, she was Muslim. She invited her family to her wedding in Mexico. But her Muslim family kidnapped her instead. They sold her for $500,000 to a Muslim in Yemen. Taken to Yemen, she's now in a prison in the Islamic world in the Middle East. Her father said, you are no longer in the West. You are in the Islamic Middle East. Women like you are killed. And the only regret the father has, that he didn't kill her before selling her. The UN is also a really fine organization. Experts appointed by the World Health Organization have finally begun to investigate allegations that its staffers sexually abused thousands of women during the Ebola outbreak in Congo. Wonderful to bring in the United Nations to see them do that sort of thing.
It's awful.
The head of NATO announced this week that the Ukraine will join NATO, which means there can never be an end to this war. What an unbelievably stupid thing to say.
That's crazy.
Vladimir Putin, in a speech this week, told the truth, which the U.S. media can't handle, which he said that the war in Ukraine is being prolonged and the death toll is being increased because Western nations, and particularly the United States, are offering weapons to the West to kill Russians. There is one country, and only one, where reality is beginning to sink in, and they are beginning in significant numbers to protest the war. Germany. And whether or not they will overturn their country's support of it, I do not know. But I do know that when Biden went to Kiev this week and recommitted that America will continue to supply weapons to the Ukraine for however long it takes, he might as well have said, and I'm here to start World War III. I read an interesting article that sent shivers up my spine this week was written by Seymour Hersh, the same one that wrote the investigative journalistic piece on Biden planning to blow up the Russian-German oil gas pipeline to make certain that there would be a war. And he was making a point and saying this is true of Biden, just as it was true of JFK. And I know it to be true of George W. Bush because he told me personally even before he was elected that all presidents, when they get into the White House, the thing that they crave the most is to be a great president. They want to be remembered among the great presidents. Abraham Lincoln, great president. Why? Civil War. And FDR is considered a great president. Why? World War II. They want to be considered great presidents, and JFK had a whole conversation with Seymour Hersh and said, I want to be a great president, and I've studied the history of the great presidents, and all of the great presidents were wartime presidents. Do you think a president needs to be involved in a war to be great? And the next breath, he began talking about wanting to start this war with Vietnam and how he began to bomb North Vietnam and send Americans into North Vietnam to start that war long before it was announced, long before LBJ fabricated, knowingly lied to the American people about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, causing the death of 58,000 Americans and 1 million Vietnamese. JFK deliberately started the war. He wanted to be a great president. His ego got too much of him. Part of that article, though, brings us right back to the Ukraine because in his one of his talks with Seymour Hersh, he said, I get a pass on the Cuban Missile Crisis, but the fact is Khrushchev thumped me. His knowledge was so much beyond mine, his rhetoric, his presence, his understanding of the issues was so far beyond mine that I could not measure up to him. And it was an admission that one of the smarter people to be in the White House, with Biden being among the dumbest, was overwhelmed by his Russian counterpart, who was professional versus a man that was really good at wooing people with his style. And we're in this Ukrainian war because this time when we played the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were dumber than dumb. And rather than capitulate and realize that world war, a nuclear war, is in no one's interest, we fanned the flames of nuclear war. Well, that's enough news for the program. I'd like to return, unless you guys have something to add, to where we left off a week ago in Hosea, the 5th chapter, 12th statement.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It begins, and it's kind of an interesting thought. He says, it's Yahweh speaking, and he says, well, I'm like a moth. I'm perceived as something wasteful and fabricated. To Ephraim, which represents the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom. Mm-hmm. And much like a fungal parasite or a septic infection, a ragop, a degenerative disease or dry rot to the household of Yehudah. It's really true. You don't ever hear Yahweh's name. Ever. All of these right-wing religious wackos in Israel, not a single mention of Yahweh's name. Ever. They have turned their rabbis into gods. They said, and God said, reading from the Talmud. God didn't say anything like that. God had nothing to do with the Talmud. Their God is fabricated. God of Judaism, the gods of Christianity and Islam, all fabricated. Much like a fungal parasite. Have you ever looked at a house that has dry rot? Can't fix it.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing you could do. In fact, when I was looking at homes when I wanted to be near my granddaughter in Cincinnati, Ohio, what I found is that almost no one was taking care of their homes. They didn't know how to do preventative maintenance and painting. And you could walk up to any of the doors or windows and put your finger right through them, the wood.
Wow.
The trim around them. All of them.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's all because of wood rot. And what they did is they puttied it in and painted it over. You push your finger right through it.
Oh, my gosh.
God.
And you're going to say, the only way to resolve this is all new doors, windows, and trim. And even if you do that, you have to say, you know how much damage has now been done into the framing of the house with the water incursion?
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
Oh, how's it going to fall down? Who are you kidding? Readers thought I was crazy. Well, the speaker here is God. So his assessments are valid. His testimony is accurate. And what makes this a bombshell? Yahweh's dismal evaluations of religiosity of Yisrael and Yehuda were comparative endorsements when contrasted against the people's perception of their God. His view of them is that your religion has made you worthless. Their view of him, you're a parasite. Is there any reason that God had a 2,500-year timeout from his people? Is there any wonder that God had to turn to Goyim? I mean, we found out today that our beloved Jackie, she is the not only the publisher of the Yada Yahowah series and chief editor, she is the glue that keeps the family together and humming. Jackie is Jewish, Ashkenazi, correct?
Yes.
Yep. Dee, you're also Jewish.
I am.
Yep. And Kirk, your wife is Jewish, I believe. Her sons are like 50, 60% Jewish.
Her sons.
We're very much isolated Goyim. For those Jews who are listening, say, I'm not going to take any advice from a Goy. Well, virtually everybody that's part of Yada Yahowah happens to be Jewish. And God chose a Goyim, whether you like it or not, to convey this message to you because there was none among his community that were willing to do it.
Well, Yahweh didn't call you the lone Goy for nothing.
No, I am the lone Goy for a reason, yeah. And, and as I continue with Ezekiel, for those who have been listening, I am now in the 44th of 48 chapters of Ezekiel, so nearly done. I'm now in the Babel series, which is both Daniel and Ezekiel, 1,700 pages into this analysis. And I can tell you that if we hadn't done this together for the past 22 years, if we hadn't learned as much as we have learned and become as confident as we are, there is no way I could have done this.
Yeah.
Ezekiel is really bleak. It is really dark and twisted and black. And the writing is so dismal. The quality of the communication is so incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Made up words, countless remarks without any verbs, missing pronouns, wrong words in the wrong context, contradictory. It's just dark and twisted and ugly and demonic, and it is the most anti-Semitic tome I've ever read. Listen, I'm a student of the Quran. I've written probably the best read book there is today on the Quran in prophetdom. I'm an expert in Paul's letters, having written 4 volumes to expose and condemn them. I've studied a lot of Judaism as we were writing the Yada Yahowah series. Writing Prophet of Doom, I had to read and study Mein Kampf to make comparisons between Mein Kampf and the Quran, which are numerous. I've never read anything that demonizes and dehumanizes Jews to the extent that Ezekiel does. To think that Jews are responsible for it being considered among the prophets is a self-inflicting horror.
Agreed.
The Jews that endorsed this and placed it among the prophets so that it would be considered scripture by the Christians and by the Muslims, who speak a lot of the Gog and Magog war, which is totally fanciful, and used the Gog and Magog war and used the Lord of Babel's depiction of Jews, the rape of Jews. There's 25 different ways to kill Jews, to exterminate Jews in this book. And the new temple is modeled after Auschwitz. It's a death camp. And to think that religious Jews put this piece of trash in the middle of prophets to cause Jews to be demonized and to be dehumanized, it's appalling beyond words. And so if you think that I have a disrespect of rabbis, understand where it comes from.
Yes.
I understand what they have done to destroy the lives of Jews. They are the single biggest threat to God's people. Jews have no greater enemy than Judaism. Not my opinion. It is God's constant and irrefutable conclusion. This happens to be one of those many statements. Israel had come to believe that the stories of Yahweh rescuing them were just stories. The only real God was a waste of time and energy that could be spent around fake ones. And they become great at inventing gods modeled after their rabbis. From Ephraim's perspective, they were a brilliant flame, and Yahweh was but a moth bedazzled by the brilliance of their sages. As I'm reading and translating the 44th chapter of Ezekiel, it's interesting that God makes his third or fourth grand appearance. He keeps on repeating his grand appearances as if he's going to get one of them right. And he immediately transitions into an ordinary man. So we have God-man, a basis of Christianity, of God-man. And you just wonder, how in the world do people make this transition? How do they go from witnessing the brilliance of Yahweh to calling men brilliant, who contradict him, who upstage him? Now, by comparison, Yahweh's great love, Yahudah, saw God as a fungus and parasite. Yahweh was a disease to be avoided. Don't think it isn't true. Yeah. You can read the Gemara, you can read the Talmud, you can listen to rabbinic sermons, and guess what you will never hear? Yahweh. Not once, not ever. He is a disease to be avoided. It is little wonder that the relationship called for a divorce. Had they been mine, I don't think I would have dignified them with this letter, but Yahweh felt it was appropriate, and so Hosea is the divorce decree. The Torah actually says that if you want a divorce, you write a letter and explain your reasons, and that's sufficient. Goodbye, good riddance. Hosea is that letter. Yahweh says, I am divorcing you. Nonetheless, he is God, and that comes with a number of burdens. boy, it's a job I wouldn't want. I'm stunned that men play God.
I want to be God. Yeah, are you kidding?
Yeah. One of the burdens is that he must always honor his promises, no matter how undeserving the beneficiary. He has promised to reconcile his relationship with those who view him unkindly. And that includes Yisrael. So let's at least hope that there will be a representative number willing to recant their prior positions. You know, as I wrote the introduction to the most recent chapter of this book on Ezekiel, I stated for the second time that as it relates to the popularity contest that Satan is holding with Jews, that he's winning. He's going to win overwhelmingly. The number of people that will choose to believe that Satan is God versus those that I can convince that he is not, even citing the words of Yahowah, and with Dode's testimony indicting such a notion, I'm going to lose by more than 1,000 to 1. Fortunately, God's not running a popularity contest. Satan and God are not playing the same game. Satan's going to win the most souls, but Yahweh is not interested in the most, just the best. And so all we have to do to prevail is have a handful of Israelites and Yehudim accept Yahweh and be there for his return, for him. Shouting out his name, welcoming him back. All we need. Satan's goal is to have a clean sweep. If there are no Jews on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, which is just 10 years from now, the rabbinic calendar is full of crap. Maimonides was an absolute idiot when he put it together. It is very easy to establish a calendar and to verify it. Jackie and Dee have done a yeoman's job on this. My fact checker, Mike, has also done a thorough job on it. It is very easy to determine what year it is. And we are just now 10 years away from year 6000 Yah. And when Yahweh returns, Satan knows the date. He's read the Torah and prophets.
Oh, sure.
He can figure it out. I figured it out. He's smarter than I am. He knows when Yahweh's going to return. So his game is, if he can convince every Jew that he's God and that Yahweh's not, there'll be no one there for Yom Kippurim, and there'll be no reason for Yahweh to return if there isn't a single Jew willing to accept him. You can't have a day of reconciliations when there's no one to reconcile. He needs a clean sweep. All we need is a handful. And while I think there will be thousands, I think, between Jews and Goyim that are going to be there, welcoming Yahweh upon his return, October 2nd, 6:22 p.m., sunset in Jerusalem, 2033. I think there'll be 7,000 there. But all we need is 7. And I tell you, we already have way more than that are part of Yahweh's family. Yahweh has already won. He isn't going to give up on humanity. He's not going to say, oh, there's not enough Jews. I'm going to stay in heaven. Let Satan have the earth. But that's his only play. He's got to keep Yahweh from returning, because when Yahweh returns, he gets locked up forevermore. This idea in Revelation that he's going to get released in 1,000 years is poppycock.
Yep.
He gets locked up forevermore when Yahweh and Dode return. That's going to be 10 years from now, October 2nd, 2033. His entire game is to convince every Jew to ignore Yahweh, to stay religious, to stay political, and be unwilling to accept him. He's going to lose that battle, but he's going to win the popularity contest by at least 1,000 to 1 among Jews, and by 1,000,000 to 1.
Yeah, at least.
In Gentiles. Had Ephraim perceived that which was associated with this malady, this sickness? It's interesting. The word that the religious used to speak of their God and their God's houses and their God's scripture and their God's ministers and their God's book, the Bible, which is based upon Babel, by the way, same exact root. Seems to confuse by intermixing. The word
Holy.
Is holy.
Holy.
Yeah, holy. Holy. Holy in Hebrew means associated with the S is associated with. Holy just means malady, sickness, illness, disease, injurious affliction, infirmity, a cause of suffering and death. That's what holy is. So next time you use it's the high holy days, realize that what we're talking about is something that is diseased, sick. Yahweh uses the term set apart.
Kodesh.
Yeah. Kodesh is the opposite, really, of holy. They would call the Bible the Holy Bible. They would call it the God's Holy Church. And things like that are popular. Yahweh is very unpopular. Kodesh means to be set apart, to be uncommon, to be separated from the norm, to be distinct from those things which are popular. There's nothing more popular in human culture than religion and politics. So to be Kodesh, which we must be if we're going to have a relationship with Yahweh, we have to be unpopular. We have to be set apart, separate, and distinct from those things. Well, Ephraim, instead, he was holy. And Yehudah is oozing. It's a pestilent wound. Then Ephraim would have gone to Asher, reaching out to the king of the contentious adversary. Asher is an interesting word because it is based upon a very important Hebrew word, Asher, one of the 12 tribes, bears that name. It is a wonderful term in Hebrew. It means to be associated with, to walk along the narrow and restrictive path to get the most joy out of life. It's the way to receive the benefits of the relationship. Asher is a verb, it's a preposition, it's a noun. It's a really powerful word. And so what is meaningful to Yahweh, the religious abscond with, and Satan in particular, and Asher is a counterfeit of that. It's based on the concept that is used with Mary in the Catholic Church. By the way, Mary in Hebrew means contentious and rebellious. Nice term for Roman Catholicism. But Asher is the blessed, the ones who receive the benefits, the fortunate and fortuitous is what the word means. And yet Yahweh would view them as contentious and adversarial. But this would have been incapable of healing you. This cannot cure you from the infectious disease which ensnares you. This is Hosea, he delivers. Hosea 5:13. This is a metaphorical statement. The northern kingdom was never circumspect. They reveled in their religious beliefs and they celebrated their false gods. It actually began before the break between the northern and southern kingdom. Solomon had a penchant for marrying religious foreigners and to keep them happy, he sold himself out and became religious. That's why you read books like the Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, it's all vanity. He lost it. He had everything, and he threw it all away. And it was within a matter of years after his death that the northern kingdom split off from the southern kingdom, and it was but a few years after that that the northern kingdom was no more. That the Assyrians gobbled them up and took them away, such that they were lost to history. And the reason is they were diseased. They did this to themselves. They reveled in their religious beliefs. They celebrated their false gods. There was no king Jerob, and the Israelites did not venture on their own accord to Assyria seeking a cure for what ailed them. Rather, Asher is being used symbolically to convey the alternative covenant, the religious path to anticipated beliefs and blessings. And therein, Malek Yareb becomes the Lord of contentiousness, the adversary, who was ever ready to beguile and then disappoint. The symbolic language continues, and God says, as a result, I will be akin to a roaring lion to Ephraim, like a conciliatory lion approaching the family of Yehudah. I myself will tear up or tear apart. Then I will either walk away or lift up, such that nothing will rescue or snatch away. It's a sad situation, but God was saying, there's nothing more I can do for you.
Had enough. What could you use them for?
Yeah, I've roared, I've screamed, I've scratched, I've done everything. I can't fix it anymore. And with Yehudah, I'm going to try to continue to be consolatory because, well, there's still work to do. This was 750 BCE. The northern kingdom would be gone in 30 years. But the southern kingdom would live on, and there was work to do. There would still be prophets for the next 200 years in the southern kingdom in Yehudah. And, of course, it was through Yehudah that Yahweh placed his soul in a descendant of Yehudah to fulfill Pesach. So God said, I'm going to have to walk away. There's nothing I can do to snatch you away from this. So essentially, it's over. So it's a play on words, an example where similar things convey a vastly different outcome. Looking first at Ephraim, the Sachal lion is roaring. With it, God is shown poised to tear up Yisrael. Taraf, ripping the nation to shreds, and then Halak walking away, because the purpose will have been to destroy. There's nothing worth saving. And for Israel, there will be Ein Natsal, no rescue, no redemption. Well, not for another 2,780 years. Now with Yehudah, the Kafir lion is conciliatory, ready to make amends. We know this because Kafir is from kafar, which means to reconcile, serving as the basis for Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations. Then as we approach the same verbal chain, we discover that Yahweh will, Ani, personally, that's me, myself, and I, tear his beloved away from Ephraim, separating them from harm's way. while Towrah providing whatever they require. So now, rather than halak walk away, Yahweh is nasa, lifting them up and carrying Yehudah home. As a result, aim natzal, no one will ever be able to take them away again. Continuing to address Yehudim, this is Hosea 5:15. It reads, I will go away, but I will return. I will travel about such that I come back to my place until they closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship through their restoring witness and eternal testimony. And they seek my presence, responsibly investigating and learning about my appearance. It will be during a time of trouble that they will approach by earnestly seeking me, longing to learn about the relationship. There's hope. God said he was going to go away, but he was going to return. He was going away to his place, and he would return to his place, because he has more than one place. The universe is his place. But he left Yehudah to return to Shamayim. And from Shamayim, he will return to his place in Yehudah. And his return to that place, to his home on Mount Moriah, will be when they come to closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship through the restoring witness of the eternal testimony. Ad, which means witness, testimony, and eternal. Ashar, which means to receive the benefits of a relationship. Shamar, which is to observe, closely examining and carefully considering. Three wonderful words together. And they will seek my presence, responsibly investigating and learning about my appearance, which is going to occur in 10 years. Baqash, paneh, ane. They will have a desire to meet with me, encounter me face to face. It's going to be during a time of sa'ar, of great distress, of being besieged, of being restricted, of being enclosed and confined, of being narrowed as a country through the final solution, that two-state solution that they want to impose on Israel, narrowing the country to about 10 miles wide at its waist, where 70% of the people reside. Be a time of terrible trouble as anti-Semitism is on the rise, as Islamic hatred of Jews is supported by the progressives. The world will turn against them. Europe is already turned against them. America will sell them out in a heartbeat. The reason that America voted against Israel was simple. We're so invested in our war against Russia and the Ukraine, we couldn't have anyone in the Middle East undermine what America is seeking to do. So we'll sell even our friends out to support a war. So it's during a time of trouble, when things get so bad that Israelites, Yehudim, finally recognize that they do not have anyone within their religious and political community that they can trust. Not the liberals, not the right-wingers, not the Reform Jews, not the Haredim. That the world is collapsing around them. They're hated more than any other people. It is during this time of Sa'ar. Yahweh uses it to say this is the time of Yaakov's Sa'ar, troubles.
Troubles. Yeah.
That they will approach by earnestly seeking me as they learn about the relationship. It's about as hopeful as anything you could read. Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah. No, I was going to say this. It just screams out when I read it the first time, and every time you're just reading just now, it just screams out Shabat Torah. I don't understand what everybody's waiting on. He said, I'm going to give you a written record.
Yep.
I'm going to preserve it. I analyzed all the words about the record and so forth, and the witness and this, that, the other. It's all about the Torah, even the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you like. You protected it. There's a protected document. It's there. It shows up in 48. Nobody knew what to do with it till you came along. We've translated it. Everybody can check anything themselves. There's not a document in the world that can teach you to understand what the Torah says that's better than this. You don't need anything better than this, to be quite frankly, and to be quite honest with you. It's right here. What's your delay? He said, you got a prophecy right here in the middle of it. It could not possibly have been known 2,500 years ago unless the Yahweh Spirit was telling him what to say. Not only about squeezing away. It's just everything is in this little section.
Yes.
For goodness sake,
here's Yahweh
care
saying,
about Yah at all, do it now.
Yeah, 2,700 and 75 years ago. He's saying that, right now, Yisrael, the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes are a lost cause. I can't fix it. But there is hope with Yehudah. And there will become a time of troubles, of Israel being narrowed and distressed and besieged and restricted and confined. There will be a time like that, which is quickly approaching, when they will actually approach and seek me, longing to learn about this relationship with me, and that's going to occur for one reason. They will closely examine and carefully consider the ways to receive the benefits of the relationship through the restoring and eternal testimony. And they're going to seek my presence as a result. Well, it's not difficult. Yahweh provided proof that he is God in the Torah. His creation account, the account of the flood, the story of the Exodus from Egypt, his relationship with Abraham, this legacy document that we have of all of those conversation and events, all of which can be proven scientifically and historically. The greatest book ever written. And it contains stunning proof, overwhelming proof that Yahweh is God, and that you can trust what he is offering. And then on top of that, he told us how we could go about determining whether someone else was speaking for him or not. If you take the book of Yirma'yah or Hosea or Yeshayah, Zechariah, and you want to know whether or not that was inspired by Yahweh, the creator God of the universe, he gives you a standard to apply.
Criteria. Yeah.
Everything that is said has to be consistent with everything he's previously said. Everything that is said has to be historically accurate. Everything that is said has to be prophetically accurate. There can be no contradictions, no mistakes, no errors in fact historically or prophetically. No prophecy, it's not from him. Inaccuracy, it's not from him. And so you can go through the books. You can read Job and say, no prophecy. Plus the whole tone of the book is inconsistent with Yahweh. Throw it out. You can read Enoch and say, oh my God, this is so diverse from what Yahweh said. This is laughable. Throw it out. Ezekiel, absolute trash. The test was make one mistake about either history or prophecy. You have to throw it out. He didn't get anything right. Everything he said was wrong. God made it really clear as to how you can go about determining what he said. So which books to read isn't difficult. You've got a brain. You've got time. Now, I will tell you there is one challenge of the whole thing, and that is that both Hebrew and English translations, and it's funny to say a Hebrew translation, but the language that Yahowah wrote
destroyed the language.
these instructions to us, and modern Hebrew are very different.
Mm-hmm.
They pretend as if the 22 letters and Paleo-Hebrew were without vowels, and you need the Mesorites to do it. Then they create it for the modern Hebrew language without vowel points, as if, well, we're going to ignore that. No, there's 5 vowels and 17 consonants in the 22 letters. And the words are very easily defined, both by their pictographic nature of the letters, as well as in context. It's not difficult, but it takes time. And if you're not willing to invest that time, or at least take the time to read the 30 books that are available for you free at yadayah.com and read them there, you don't take the time to read them where at least an effort has been made to translate Yah's words accurately, to convey the message truthfully and completely, and then help people understand it by making the necessary connections to go from knowledge to understanding. You need to do those things. That's why he said, closely examine and carefully consider in the previous statement.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that for you. You can capitalize on it. You can verify what we have shared because we provide the basis of every translated word. Read it. Learn. It's handed to you. We've been working on this now for 22 years on behalf of the Jews and Goyim that are interested in knowing the truth about God, getting to know him personally. But it's going to take a time of horrible trouble. That's what God said. But he said it's going to happen, and it is going to happen, and it is happening. And we are now just 7 years away from the worst of that. The last 3 years are going to be hell on earth. And it's likely that there will be, maybe 3 to 4 years preceding, starting in 2026, that are going to be exceedingly difficult. The reason why I'm equivocating here some is that when you read the texts that we know are valid prophetically, it speaks of this time of trouble, and it's very easy to date year 6000 Yah, and we know that the next Mikre that Yahowah will fulfill in dramatic fashion, because he is fulfilling Towrah in your listening, is Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations, and it's going to occur in year 6000 Yah. So we can backtrack from that and say, we know there's a period of Yaakov's trouble, and it appears to be a little over 3 years long when it is the most intense, and it will begin to become particularly bad 3 or 4 years prior to that. Really, the issue as to exactly when these dates transpire, up to this point, because this is there is no question of what's going to happen at 6:22 p.m., October 2nd, sundown in Jerusalem in 2033. It's how far do we dial back from there that the worst of these troubles begin. And what I'm here to tell you is that if you're listening to this and you haven't made your decision on behalf of Yahowah, then you really shouldn't care. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Knowing Yah is uplifting. It's freeing. It's enlightening.
Mm-hmm.
It's empowering. Enriching. It's every positive thing. God asks very little from us, and the things that he does ask from us are all beneficial to us. Walk away from religion and politics. Walk to him and along the path he has provided so that he can perfect us, which means attend the Moed Mikre, Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, Shavua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. Every one of them is a festival feast. It's a celebration of our life with Yahweh, a wonderful party. No sacrifice there. Trust and rely on Yahweh. He's trustworthy. Man's not. Religion's not. Politics are not. He is. All you have to do there is gain.
Yes.
Supposed to examine and carefully consider his conditions of the covenant, which are presented in the Torah. There's nothing but benefit to that. The time you spent doing that will be returned a billionfold. And as parents, we're asked to circumcise our sons on the 8th day so that we remember and they remember to prioritize Yahweh in their lives. And as men, we must be circumcised to attend Pesach, which is the first step. That's the doorway to life, to which we enter Yahweh's family. That's it. That's all God asks for us. Doesn't ask for money. Doesn't ask for prayers. Doesn't ask for us to worship him. In fact, has no interest in us worshiping him. Has no interest in us praying to him. Has no interest in our money. He has no rules and no laws. He has prescriptions for living. He has guidance. He has teaching. He has instructions, all of which we benefit from. Why wait? What happens if you pass away before you have the opportunity to make the right call? Your soul squandered. What happens if you make the decision too late to educate yourself to the point that you can share the truth with a loved one and have them join you through eternity, but because you waited, you weren't prepared. You squandered their soul. What do you have to wait? Why wait? What do you have to lose? He's God after all. He has our best interest at stake. He wants to embrace us. And he's a father, not a lord. Fathers lift their children up. They protect them. They nourish them. They teach them. They guide them. It's what our Father wants to do for all of his children. So in this statement, Yah was affirming that he's going to back away and allow Yisrael to do as they have chosen, which is to fend for themselves. Having come to their rescue, having devoted himself to guiding, teaching, and protecting them, God has better things to do with his time than allow them to abuse him. This long intermission would last almost 2,800 years with Israel, and within several centuries of that time with Yehudah, from whom the last of the prophets would come. Then at long last, Yahudim will emerge from their nightmarish past, open their eyes. They're going to become observant. And what should appear? Ad Asher Shamar. The opportunity to closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship through the restoring witness of the eternal testimony. Those of us who have already joined the Bereth, the covenant family, who attend Yahweh's Mikre, his invitations to be called out and meet, who are guided by his Torah, which means teaching and guidance, are going to have a ringside seat for the Great Awakening. It will occur during the time of Jacob's troubles, the last 3.5 years prior to Yahweh's return. We have calculated that it is likely that the last two witnesses, the most famous of them being Elia, is pronounced Elijah. Elia means Yahweh's God. Going to be here for Passover in 2030. I wouldn't wait that long if I were you. because 2 out of 3 Jews are going to die. And they're going to do better than the world as a whole. We're headed to nuclear annihilation. It's not God who's going to be wiping people out.
We do it
that
ourselves.
Period. We're going to do it to ourselves. The Eth Sarah La Yaakov. Eth means time. Sarah, troubles. La is of. Yaakov is the father of Yisrael and became the name of Yisrael, was renamed Yisrael, so it's the time of Israel's troubles, is subsequently explained in the 30th chapter of Yirma'yah, Jeremiah, which we will consider, perhaps not in this program, but one next week or the week after. Should you wish to mark your calendars and share Pesach with Elia, as I said, it's going to commence at sundown, be Tuesday, April 16th, 2030. That's a Bib 14th, year 5997, during the first day of Chag Matzah. Yes, that's a surprise to religious Jews because they think that matzah is the missing ingredient, or that the leaven that would go into bread, which matzah represents unyeasted bread, but that matzah is simply incorporated into Pesach when it's the other way around. Pesach without matzah is counterproductive. Then 3.5 hellish years thereafter, addressing the times, and half a time reference at the conclusion of Daniel, which I think is being presented in Eliah's voice. Yahweh will return to reconcile his relationship with Yisrael and Yehudah. That story is told in the 31st chapter of Yirma'yah, and one of the most profoundly important prophetic revelations ever given by God. Yahweh's people will Baqash, paneh, responsibly, eagerly seek Yahweh's presence, diligently desiring his appearance, Baha Sha'ar, during this time of trouble. It is then that Yisrael and Yehudah will shakar, earnestly seek their God, longing to rekindle their relationship with Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is directing our attention to what he would subsequently reveal through one of the greatest of the Nabi, Yirma'yah. This is the message that is recorded in the 30th and 31st chapters. So we'll begin this and finish it next week. It begins. Ha-tabar, the word, which to reveal the way to enjoy the benefits of the relationship. Asher came to exist with Yirma'yah. Yirma'yah is an interesting name. It was actually written here as Yirma'yahu for Yahweh. The Yirma means to raise, to lift up, to teach, to guide, to respect, and revere. It's mistransliterated Jeremiah, but it's Yirma'yahu. From Yahweh, to announce, this is what Yahweh, the God of Yisrael, proclaims, so as to declare, of your own volition, write all of these words, which lead to the proper path to get the most out of life, that I have and will be speaking to you about Tabar El Atah, during doing so in a written document, so that there is a Yirma'yah 32. We're doing this program orally to encourage you to read what Yah has had his prophets write. God's overwhelming preference is for the written word. it should be yours as well. I hope this program causes those who listen to read. I know that in the Covenant family, all of us read and study Yahweh's Torah and prophets. It is what we must do to come to know God. No shortcuts. And so with the spoken word, it only has a couple of advantages. It's easier for people to listen. It's more popular in today's world for people to listen. And so we're doing this program for two reasons. One is that for those who have not read an introduction to God, Yada Yahowah, Coming Home, Observations, Questioning Paul, the Babel series, or all of the series under the Yada Yah umbrella, we're inviting you to do so. Yahweh's inviting you to do so. And so this is the way of reaching out and catching people's ears to the point that Yahweh can focus their eyes. It's the written word that matters. Why? Because prophecy is only affirmed through the written word. God could have told Yirma'yah anything, or Hosea anything. If it wasn't written down, there would be nowhere to validate it. What is a prophecy if there's an oral report? It's worthless. So that was the value of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They take copies of Yahweh's testimony back 2,200 to 2,300 years ago. So we know what God said way before many of the promises that he made actually transpired.
Mm-hmm.
And so the written word enables us to do that. By having Moshe write the Torah, we can look through the creation account and validate that the earth and the universe was indeed made in 6 24-hour days, which happens to be 14 billion years looking back using Earth time because of the relative difference in the flow of time at the event of the Big Bang as a witness to the Big Bang. It's divide.
Cool.
14 billion years by the stretching of time, which we now know at the Big Bang was 10 to the 12th slower, and you divide 14 billion years by 10 to the 12th, you end up with 6 24-hour days. That's the exact same amount of time relative to the viewer. You must do these things if you're going to know Yahweh. Yeah, if you read the flood account in Hebrew, it said it was begun by a deep upwelling of seawater. We found the impact crater, the Berkel impact crater. We found what it did and the fact that it welled up a 500-foot wall of seawater that roared up through Mesopotamia into the Black Sea and out into the Mediterranean. And we know exactly when it occurred because the Black Sea went from fresh water to salt water at that moment, and the waters rose 500 feet. The sediment, all
record too.
Testimony, all the way to it. We know these things, and we can verify them because the words were written down and maintained for us, and so we can see what it actually says. So Yahweh wants to communicate in writing to us because that's how prophecy works. That's how he proves that he is God. Not only because prophecy is not just a prediction of future events, it's an explanation of past events, including creation and the flood, the life of Israel, the exodus from Mitzrayim, Egypt. All of these things are verifiable because of the written record. The other advantage is that with a written document, while you can read it 7 times faster than you can listen to us speak, your retention goes way up. But beyond that, you can read a document at your pace. I'm sending Kirk and Dee these chapters that I'm writing of Ezekiel, even as they're being edited. so that they can kind of keep up with what we're learning, because it's pretty likely I'm going to interject something that I've learned into this program. And what they're able to do is to go back and read it at whatever pace they want, whenever it is convenient for them to read it. And in the written word, because of search engines, you can now copy and paste any Hebrew word into a search engine, and it will provide definitions for you of that word so you can validate it. Or if I make a claim that this historically or this prophetically is what Yahweh is speaking of, you can verify it. Because we know what Yahweh has said is going to happen, we were able to do things that no one else was able to do. You know, for example, I predicted more than 10 years in advance exactly what was going to happen with our invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. And beginning back in 2014, which is now, 8 years ago, I began to describe what was going to happen in the Ukraine. And what it was going to lead to. I'm not wrong. And when I've said these things in the past, it's been 1,000,000 to 1 against me. And the 1,000,000 have been wrong and I've been right. Why? Because I know exactly what's going to happen, because God explained to us what's going to happen. And if you put the pieces together, understanding is relatively easy and straightforward. It's exactly as God has said it is. But one of the advantages is when you write these things down and then they occur, you have a written record that you said it before it happened.
Right.
And you can validate it, you can study it, you can reread it, you can connect it to other things God said. It is vastly superior. And so what did God say? I want you to write it down, every word of it. And these words will reveal the way to enjoy the relationship with Yahweh. And if you do not see Yahweh's name throughout a document, it isn't from him. And if you see his name, but it isn't consistent, it isn't from him. Because behold, a time is coming, prophetically reveals Yahweh, when I will return to restore the property and possessions taken during the captivity of my people, Yisrael, which means individuals who will engage and endure with God, and Yahudah, beloved of Yah, declares Yahweh. A time is coming when I'm going to return. Do you know of any religious sect, popular, large, that speaks of Yahweh's return? They don't speak of Yahweh's return in Judaism. Yeah, never. Never is there a discussion of Yahweh's return in Judaism. There's no discussion of Yahweh's return in Christianity. Not in Islam. Not in Mormonism, Scientology. The progressives don't speak of it. The theologians don't speak of it. But here is God saying, I am going to return. And I'm going to return to restore Yisrael. Because Yisrael represents my people. And I'm going to restore Yahudah, which means I'm going to bring them together and I'm going to reconcile my relationship with them so that we are family, and what I gave to them I am going to return, which would mean all of Yisrael. There will be no West Bank. There will be no Gaza. There will be no Ramallah. It will be all Israel again. And there will be enough Yisraelites and enough Yahudim to repopulate the land during this wonderful time where Israel and the earth are restored to the conditions found in Eden as we celebrate 1,000 years of Sukkah, of camping out with God on earth. And then I will return them, bringing them back to the land for the benefit of the relationship I gave to their fathers they will receive it as their inheritance. And these are the words which to reveal the way Yahweh spoke concerning Israel and to Yehudah, not to a Christian church, not to an Islamic mosque, not to a Jewish synagogue, to Israel, to Yehudah. This is what Yahweh conveyed as we heard the sounds of concerns over the terrorists and terrorism when there were no prospects of reconciliation or peace. Yirma'yah 35, that is where we're headed, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Look what happened just this past week in Israel.
Yeah, just look at the news, my gosh.
2 young boys were murdered by a fake Palestinian, and Jews panicked, screamed, "We'll have our revenge." Bloodletting led to more bloodletting, destruction, more destruction, hate to more hate. It's not that hate is a bad thing, it just has to be properly placed. And if you're going to hate, do it like Yahweh does, with your words. Learn what to hate, how to hate, why to hate, and express it in words that are reasoned and thoughtful, that explain why a religion like Islam that inspires 95% of the world's terrorist acts is counterproductive. Explain why Christianity has led people away from Yahweh by creating a fake man god, doing everything they can to distance Yahweh and Hosea from one another and from Pesach, Matzah, Baqash, from the Torah. And that how Judaism is the single greatest threat to God's people, they won't even mention Yahweh's name. They've turned their rabbis into gods. Tell the truth. Explain that the people occupying Israel are fake Palestinians, that there is no such thing as Palestine. There's no people known as Palestinians. The last of them were eradicated, first by the Assyrians and then by the Greeks, such that there are none left, and haven't been any for 2,500 years. And there wouldn't even be the name. The name wouldn't even be known if it wasn't for the fact that Hadrian,
Towrah,
one of the great scumbags of all time, and torturing Jews, found out who the great enemy of the Jews was, and one rabbi yelled out the Philistines, so he renamed Judea Philistina, just to piss off Jews, as he proclaimed that he was God and built a temple for himself on the Temple Mount. Then no basis for it, but of course Rome influenced Europe, and so the Europeans came up with this stupid notion that there was a place called Palestine, and they wrote it in their documents that the British had the Palestine Mandate, and the so-called intellectuals and the theologians and the scholars playing God continued to parrot, which was a tragic lie by Rome. Easily disproven. And yet they repeated the lie as if it was the truth. And now you have an enraged group of Muslims pretending that Palestine exists, that it's theirs and their land, and that as Palestinians, it is their rightful place, so that they are justified in hating, killing, and annihilating Jews, all based upon a lie that is so easily disproven. Should hate such things for the damage they do. Should hate Islam for having mutilated the genitals of 200 million women. If you can't stand up against it for that reason, what's wrong with you? How do you claim to be a progressive and not hate Islam for what it has done to women, depriving them of rights, depriving them of even sexual pleasure? What's wrong with you? Why weren't Jews able to confront Paul and say, none of this is true, that there is no Jesus as the Messiah? It's Dode who's the Messiah. Jesus isn't the Son of God. It's Dode who is the Son of God. Jesus isn't coming back. It's Dode who is coming back. It's Yahweh who fulfilled Pesach through Howsha, which means Yahweh saves. He fulfilled Pesach and Matzah and Bakorim. Didn't come here to start a religion. He came here to fulfill the Torah's promises. All they had to say is that they wouldn't have deprived their people of eternal life. They wouldn't have created the cradle to which a stunningly anti-Semitic religion would rise to torment Jews. You need to know what to hate and how to hate it to protect the innocent. They didn't do it. And then they created Judaism to counter the rise of this religion and to keep Jews distinct, but in a vacuum of knowledge.
Yep.
So this is where we are. And clearly, Yirma'yah knows it, Yahweh knows it, Hosea knows it, Yashayah knows it. We know it. You should know it too. God is very frank with his people. He said, for the reasons that you have been religious and political and reliant on yourself and demeaning and discounting of me, I have rejected you and walked away from you, but I will return to you. A time is coming when it's going to get so bad. A time is coming when it's going to get so good. Good in terms of the truth being made available to you. Listen. Bad in the terms that the world's going to hate you, except this very small group that is communicating my message to you. Listen. And those who do, I will come back to and embrace. And we will live together as a family forevermore. That's God's offer to you. Kirk, you and I have our adoption papers. Dee and Jackie and my wife, Leah, they are...
Everybody comes through Baqash, though.
Yeah,
everybody
comes through naturally born into the covenant, both by choice and by DNA, and we are the ones that have our adoption. It all ends up beautifully for all of us, as well as for all of you who are listening, who are willing to respond, to act upon this. God is calling you home. Accept his offer. He is God, after all. Well, Yahweh bless. It's my pleasure to be with you on this Shabbat. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Dee. Thank you for really the wonderful upgrades that have been done here to the social media outreach. It's really become a very elegant presentation of what we're communicating and doing together, and the outreach to God's family, and we appreciate all of the work that everyone is doing in this regard. And congratulations to Miss Jackie for recognizing that she's a member of the tribe. Very soon, Kirk, we'll be working for Jackie and Dee, so let's be nice.
Yeah, I like that job.
Between now and then, let's do our job so that we have as many bosses as absolutely possible, so we can go into retirement here in 10 years, and be thrilled to be able to do it. Well, may Yah bless. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Look forward to being with you this time next week. Good night, y'all.
Shabbat shalom, y'all. Night, Dee.
Shalom. Night.